Part 1. Anger is a door. Welcome to Mindfulness, a space for reflection, healing, and learning to meet life with clarity and compassion. If you've ever felt like your emotions were too much, too messy, too loud, too overwhelming, this is your place. And today, we're starting with one of the emotions most people are afraid of: anger. Most of us were taught that anger is bad, that it's something to suppress, to fear, to hide. Angry people are seen as dangerous, unstable, out of control. We're told to calm down, to be nice, to keep the peace, even when we're breaking inside. But what if that's all wrong? What if anger isn't something to avoid, but a doorway? A few years ago, I found myself sitting in my car after a family argument. My hands were shaking, my breath short. I felt like my entire body was on fire. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't throwing things, but inside it was chaos. I had learned to keep it together on the outside to look peaceful. But that day, I couldn't fake it anymore. I remember gripping the steering wheel and whispering to myself, what the hell is wrong with me? Later that week, I stumbled on a quote by Lama Rod Owens, a Black American Buddhist teacher and author of Love and Rage. It said, "Anger is a door. If you're brave enough to walk through it, it leads to freedom." That line stopped me cold. What if my anger wasn't something broken in me, but something trying to break me free? Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Vietnamese Zen master, often reminded his students that anger is not an enemy. It is a signal, a message, a voice that says something is not okay. And more importantly, it's a part of us that needs to be cared for, not silenced. He wrote, "When we are angry, we should not do anything. Don't say anything. Don't do anything. Just breathe and take care of our anger as we would a crying baby." That image stuck with me. A crying baby doesn't need to be punished. It needs to be held. But how many of us were ever taught that? Most of us were raised in cultures where anger is labeled as bad behavior, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a person of color, especially if you grew up in a family where emotional expression was seen as weakness or rebellion. So we either stuff it down or we explode. And both paths leave us feeling ashamed, disconnected, and trapped. But there's a third path, the path of mindfulness. Instead of suppressing or acting out, mindfulness teaches us to pause and feel, to sit with the heat in our chest, the tightness in our jaw, the rush of adrenaline, and say, "I see you." To be present with our anger without judgment. It sounds simple, but it's not easy, especially when anger is tied to deep pain, betrayal, injustice, feeling unseen or unloved. I remember listening to Tara Brach, a clinical psychologist and meditation teacher, share the story of a woman who had been carrying rage for decades after childhood abuse. Through mindfulness and therapy, she learned to turn toward her anger with tenderness. She began to see it not as something to fix, but as a sacred protector, a part of her that rose up when boundaries were violated. That's the truth no one tells you. Anger often comes from love. Love for ourselves, love for fairness, love for safety. And when we deny our anger, we deny the parts of us that know we deserve more. You might be thinking, but if I let myself feel all of it, won't I lose control? It's a valid fear, but studies show the opposite. Research from the American Psychological Association has found that mindful awareness actually decreases emotional reactivity. It activates parts of the brain that help with emotional regulation and impulse control. In other words, being present with our anger doesn't make us more explosive. It makes us more aware, more compassionate, and more capable of choosing a wise response. The truth is, anger has fueled some of the most powerful movements in history. Think of the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the protests for climate justice, for racial equity. That was anger transformed into action. Not violence, not hate, but truth speaking up, energy moving forward. Sharon Salzberg, a pioneer of mindfulness in the US, said it beautifully. Anger can be a powerful energy if we learn how to work with it skillfully. So how do we begin? We start by noticing. When anger arises, pause. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice your breath. You don't have to fix anything. Just say, I'm feeling anger. That alone is radical. That alone changes the cycle. Next, get curious. What's beneath the anger? Is it fear? Hurt? Shame? Often, anger is just the guard dog, barking to protect something vulnerable underneath. Then, this is important, we hold it. Like a child who's crying because they're scared. Not bad. We breathe, we soften, we let the heat rise and fall like a wave. And finally we ask, what now? What is this anger asking of me? Does something need to be said? A boundary to set? A story to rewrite? A truth to face? This is not about becoming calm or zen. It's about becoming real, becoming free. Because here's the beautiful, messy, human truth. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to feel everything. And you are capable of holding it all with care. As we move into the next part of this series, we'll go deeper into how to work with anger, not as an enemy, but as a companion. Not to be feared, but to be listened to. Because sometimes the things we were taught to fear the most are the very things that will set us free. Are you ready to walk through that door? Let's take the first step together. Listening to anger. What's really underneath? You know that moment when anger takes over your body, your chest tightens, your fists clench, your breath turns shallow? You feel like you could scream, or maybe cry, or maybe both. But instead you say, I'm fine. You swallow it down. You scroll your phone. You smile politely. But inside, you're burning. We've all been there. And the truth is that anger you're feeling, it's not random. It's not evil. It's not shameful. It's not even the real problem. It's a messenger. Thich Nhat Hanh often taught that anger is like a howling baby crying out because it is hurting. If we can understand its pain, we can transform it. That one line changed everything for me. I started asking myself, not just why am I angry, but what is this anger trying to protect? What part of me is hurting? That shift changed the way I saw my emotions. Suddenly, I wasn't battling myself. I was listening to myself. Because here's something we don't talk about enough. Anger is almost always rooted in something deeper. Hurt, fear, betrayal, shame, grief. And if we want to truly transform our anger, not just manage it, we have to learn how to go beneath the surface. There's a story I often come back to. A woman I once met at a meditation retreat shared how she spent years yelling at her teenage son. Every little thing he did triggered her. His messy room, the way he rolled his eyes, his refusal to talk. She thought she was just impatient, hot-headed. But during the retreat, sitting in silence with her own breath, she had a memory. Her own father, when she was 15, had left and never come back. No goodbye, no explanation. That pain had never healed. And now, years later, her son's distance had touched the same wound. Her anger wasn't about her son. It was about being abandoned. Again. This is how it works. Anger is a symptom. The wound is deeper. But the beautiful thing is, once we learn to sit with the anger mindfully, it begins to reveal the truth. Jon Kabat-Zinn, the creator of mindfulness-based stress reduction, teaches that you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Anger is one of those waves. We don't fight it, we ride it, with awareness, with courage, with care. So how do we start to surf the wave of anger without drowning in it? First, recognize it. Literally say to yourself, this is anger. That act alone activates a different part of your brain, the part responsible for observation and regulation. Neuroscientists call this name it to tame it. It's simple but powerful. Second, pause. When you feel the heat rise, give yourself space. Step outside. Put your hand on your chest. Take a breath. That pause is not weakness. It's mastery. It's reclaiming your power. Third, investigate. Ask yourself, what's beneath this? You might feel sadness, loneliness, rejection, or fear. You don't have to fix it. Just notice. Let yourself feel. Tara Brach uses a beautiful practice called RAIN. Recognize what's happening. Allow it to be there. Investigate with kindness. Nurture what you find. This is what mindfulness offers us. Not a way to escape our emotions, but a way to understand them. And through understanding, to transform them. Let's pause for a moment here. Think about the last time you felt truly angry. Not irritated, not annoyed, but that full body anger. Can you go back there gently? Can you ask, what was I really needing? Maybe you needed to feel respected, or safe, or heard, or loved. Your anger was never trying to destroy you. It was trying to protect something sacred. But when we ignore that message, when we lash out or numb out, we miss the wisdom. We stay stuck in the surface storm, never reaching the calm center where clarity lives. This is where mindfulness becomes a revolutionary act. In a world that tells us to react instantly, to suppress or explode, to perform or please, slowing down and turning inward is a radical choice. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Because the more you practice, the more you'll begin to notice. Anger doesn't have to control you. It doesn't have to own you. It can become a compass, a teacher, a friend. One woman told me she started practicing mindful anger after a painful breakup. At first, she just wanted to scream. She wrote rage-filled letters she never sent. She paced around the house for hours. But then she began to sit with it, to breathe, to write without judgment. And one day she wrote, "I'm angry because I gave so much, and I feel like I disappeared in the process." That line cracked something open. She wasn't just mad at him. She was grieving the version of herself she had abandoned. And through that grief, she began to reclaim her voice, her space, her power. That is what happens when we listen to anger. We stop being afraid of our fire. We learn to tend it, to warm ourselves with it, to light the way forward. So the next time anger rises in you, stop, feel, breathe, ask it what it needs. And know this, you are not broken because you feel anger. You are not failing because you're overwhelmed. You are human, and you're healing. And the door of anger, it's waiting, not to trap you, but to lead you somewhere honest, somewhere free. Are you ready to take another step? Because in the next part, we'll explore what happens when anger becomes action, how to channel that fire into healing for yourself and for others. Let's keep walking. Transforming anger into healing for yourself and others. What if your anger wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning? It's easy to believe that anger is a dead end, a messy detour, a feeling we have to get over. But what if instead it's a doorway to something deeper, something useful, something sacred? Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "If you know how to suffer, you suffer much less." And nowhere is that more true than with anger. When we learn to meet it with mindfulness, something remarkable begins to happen. Anger becomes energy, a kind of fuel, not for destruction, but for healing. This doesn't mean turning anger into positive vibes or pretending we're not mad. Quite the opposite. It means letting our anger move through us, speak to us, and ultimately serve us. There's a quiet moment I remember, years ago, watching a friend stand up for herself after being mistreated by her employer. She wasn't loud, she wasn't cruel, but her presence was steady, unshakable. I knew her story. I knew how much she'd cried behind closed doors, how often she questioned her worth. But that day, her voice didn't shake. Later, she told me, "I was angry, but for the first time, I didn't let it drown me. I let it carry me." That's the shift. Most of us either suppress our anger or let it explode. But mindfulness gives us a third path, transformation. It starts, again, with listening. Then comes something harder, self-compassion. Because often, our anger is not just directed outward, it's inward too, at ourselves, for staying too long, for not speaking up, for believing lies, for breaking our own hearts. That's why healing starts from within. Lama Rod Owens says it clearly in Love and Rage. Healing is not a destination. It's a moment-by-moment practice of coming back to yourself. And anger, if you're brave enough to follow it, can show you exactly where you've abandoned yourself, where you've dimmed your light, where you stopped asking for what you needed. But here's the good news. Those places can be reclaimed. You reclaim them by setting boundaries you used to avoid, by saying no without guilt, by grieving what you never received, by forgiving the version of you who didn't know how to fight back. This is not easy work, but it is sacred work. And the deeper you go, the more your anger stops being just about you. It becomes about others too. Anger can teach us empathy. Think about it. When you've really sat with your own rage, when you've touched the pain beneath it, felt the heat, cried the tears, you become less likely to judge someone else for theirs. You start to recognize it in others. You start to hold space instead of reacting. You realize someone's lashing out not because they hate you, but because they're hurting. You learn to say, I see your fire. I felt it too. That doesn't mean you excuse harm. It means you respond with wisdom, not reactivity. This is where mindfulness becomes a gift, not just to you, but to your community. In fact, many great movements toward justice began not with peace, but with outrage. With someone saying, this is not okay. Whether it was Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat, or Buddhist monks self-immolating in protest during the Vietnam War, or millions of people marching for racial equality, anger was present. But it wasn't uncontrolled. It was directed. Sharon Salzberg often reminds her students that compassion is not a weak emotion. It requires strength to face suffering with love. And it requires even more strength to turn anger into something healing. So how do we begin? One breath at a time. You might be holding on to years of anger. That's okay. You don't have to release it all at once. You just have to meet it gently. Start by sitting quietly, even for a minute. Place a hand on your heart or your belly. Feel what's there. If you feel heat, tension, tightness, that's okay. Breathe with it. Ask, what is this anger trying to protect? Don't rush the answer. Just stay. You might write about it, paint it, dance it, speak it to a trusted friend, or whisper it to the sky. What matters is that it's seen, felt, honored, because the more you allow it, the more it softens. The more it softens, the more you reclaim your voice. And when you reclaim your voice, you begin to live from a deeper place, a place of truth, a place of power, a place of peace. Not the fake, forced peace that comes from pretending everything's okay, but the real peace that comes from knowing you're allowed to feel everything and still choose love. That's what transformation looks like. It's messy, it's raw, but it's real. And once you've walked through the fire of anger, not to escape it, but to understand it, you come out the other side clearer, stronger, kinder, freer. The world needs that version of you. And so do you. In the next part of this journey, we'll dive into the myths that keep us afraid of our own emotions, especially the biggest lie of all, that we have to stay calm, quiet, and smiling to be spiritual. Because the truth, your humanity is not the opposite of your peace. It's the path to it. Let's keep going. The biggest myth about anger and why it's holding you back. Let's talk about one of the biggest lies we've been taught, especially if you were raised to be good. It sounds something like this. Anger is bad. You should rise above it. Spiritual people don't get angry. Sound familiar? If you've ever felt ashamed for getting upset, if you've ever apologized for crying too loud, raising your voice, or simply not being okay, then you know this myth. It's been wrapped around you like a leash that keeps you tame, quiet, palatable. But here's the truth. Anger isn't the enemy of peace. Repression is. Thich Nhat Hanh, a global beacon of peace, never taught people to suppress anger. In fact, he was one of the rare teachers who gently urged us to embrace it with mindfulness. He often said, to be mindful of our anger is to be present with it, to cradle it like a crying child. Now, ask yourself, when a child is screaming, do you shut the door and walk away? Or do you hold them, even if their sobs shake your chest? That's the difference between denial and presence. The myth that spiritual people must always be serene has silenced too many voices. It has made people feel like they're failing when they're actually just feeling. And feeling is not a failure. It's a sign that you're alive. Look at Lama Rod Owens, a Black queer Buddhist teacher in America. His teachings revolve around anger, especially in the face of systemic injustice. He doesn't tell people to let it go and float above the pain. Instead, he teaches how to sit with it, how to transform it, how to act from it without becoming consumed. Because the truth is, anger has intelligence. It's not just heat, it's information. It says, something's wrong here. It says, a need has been ignored. It says, your boundary was crossed. When we ignore anger, we ignore our deepest inner compass. And that's where real harm begins. Not from the fire itself, but from pretending it isn't burning. Let me tell you a story. A woman once came to a meditation teacher, heartbroken and exhausted. She had spent years in an emotionally abusive relationship, staying silent, trying to be kind, trying to be the bigger person. But inside, she was rotting. She whispered, I thought if I stayed peaceful, I was doing the right thing, but now I'm not even sure who I am. The teacher looked at her and said, my dear, peace is not the absence of anger. It is the presence of truth. That sentence cracked something open in her. Because peace isn't a mask. It's not a spiritual costume you wear to hide your pain. It's what comes after you've honored your pain and let it speak. So let's shatter this myth together. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to feel betrayed. You are allowed to cry ugly tears, punch pillows, scream into the wind, and still be whole, and still be worthy, and still be on a spiritual path. The Dalai Lama himself once said in an interview, I get angry. Of course, I am a human being. Read that again. I am a human being. It's not a flaw, it's a foundation. The work is not to erase your anger. The work is to hold it with such radical compassion that it loses its sharpness and begins to speak clearly. In one of Thich Nhat Hanh's most beautiful practices, he invites us to speak to our anger like a dear friend. You say, hello, my anger, I see you. I will take good care of you. It sounds simple, even childlike, but this practice is deeply powerful because when anger feels seen, it doesn't have to shout. When it's welcomed, it doesn't have to slam the door. Imagine what your life would be like if you did that, if you gave your emotions a safe home, without shame, without guilt, without spiritual bypassing. That's when healing begins. And not just for you, but for everyone you love, because the people around you can feel when you're pretending. When you're bottling things up, when you're fine, but really not. And that tension leaks into your tone, your relationships, your sleep. But when you meet your anger mindfully, you change the energy. You become safer. Not because you never get upset, but because you're honest. And honesty is safety. You become someone who can set boundaries without cruelty. Someone who can speak their truth without burning bridges. Someone who can show up, not as a saint, not as a doormat, but as a whole, feeling, fierce-hearted human being. And that is who you were meant to be. In the next part, we'll go even deeper. We'll explore the neuroscience of anger, how your brain reacts, and more importantly, how you can calm your body without numbing your truth. Because this journey isn't just about emotions. It's about your nervous system, your breath, your body's wisdom. Anger lives there too, and so does freedom. Let's keep going. What your body knows before your mind does. The neuroscience of anger and the path to healing. Have you ever felt your fists clench before you even knew you were angry? Or maybe your chest got tight, your breathing shallow, your jaw locked, long before the words, I'm not okay, ever made it to your lips. That's not random. That's your body, your oldest, wisest companion speaking first. Here's something most people don't realize. Anger isn't just an emotion. It's a full body experience. And often your body knows what's happening long before your thinking mind catches up. There's a reason for that. It's called the amygdala, the ancient part of your brain responsible for detecting threats. It's fast. It's instinctive. It reacts in milliseconds. And when it senses danger, real or imagined, it sends a message to your body. Get ready to fight. Your heart races. Your muscles tense. Blood rushes away from your gut to your limbs. Your breathing changes. Your focus narrows. This is your body preparing for action. Protection, survival. This is anger at the physiological level. Now here's where it gets interesting. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that makes decisions, tells stories, and keeps you civilized. That part comes online after your body reacts, which means your body feels the anger before your mind can explain it. That's why someone can say something that seems small, but you suddenly feel like you've been punched in the soul. It's not overreacting. It's your nervous system remembering something. Maybe a childhood wound. Maybe a long history of being silenced. Maybe a boundary you didn't even know was sacred until it got stepped on. Thich Nhat Hanh taught that awareness begins with the breath, because the breath is the bridge between body and mind. When you feel anger rising, the first step is not to suppress it or explode. The first step is to breathe with it, not in a forced, I have to calm down way, but like you would sit next to a dear friend who's shaking with grief, gently, patiently, with love. Try it now. Inhale slowly. Feel the breath touch your chest, your belly, your throat. Exhale with the intention of softening, not pushing anything away. This is not about fixing your anger. It's about meeting it in the body where it lives. Because if you only engage anger with your mind, trying to rationalize it, explain it, judge it, you miss the root. You end up dancing around the fire without ever stepping into its warmth. And here's something even deeper. Sometimes anger is not even yours. It's inherited, stored in your DNA, passed down through generations that were never allowed to scream, cry, fight, protest, especially if you come from communities that were colonized, enslaved, silenced. Your body may be carrying rage that belongs to your ancestors. And your healing, it ripples backward as well as forward. When you sit with your anger, when you breathe through it instead of burying it, you're not just healing yourself, you're healing your lineage. Lama Rod Owens calls this radical self-care as a political act. To feel, to heal, to express safely and truthfully, this is rebellion. This is liberation. Especially in a world that teaches us to shut up and smile. But liberation doesn't mean acting out violently. It means learning to feel without fear. Let me tell you about a young man I once met at a retreat. We'll call him Marcus. Marcus had been raised to never talk back, never show disrespect, never raise his voice, especially as a black man in a predominantly white conservative community. He did everything right, got good grades, went to church, worked hard, smiled. But inside he was boiling. One night someone cut him off in traffic, flipped him the finger, and Marcus snapped. He screamed, punched the steering wheel until his knuckles bled. Later, shaking, he said to me, "I don't know what happened. I just exploded." Of course he did, because that wasn't about traffic. That was years of swallowed rage bursting out all at once. What changed everything for Marcus wasn't a therapist telling him to count to 10. It was learning to track his body, to notice the signs before they reached the edge, to feel the tension in his shoulders, the heat in his chest, the tremble in his voice, and meet them with breath, with presence, with care. Slowly, he became less afraid of his anger, and when he wasn't afraid of it, he didn't need to run from it, or fight through it, or pretend it wasn't there. He learned to sit with it, like a teacher, like a truth, and with time, his rage softened into clarity. His fear softened into strength. His silence turned into boundaries. Into no, I will not tolerate this. Into yes, I deserve to be heard. And you know what happened? He started sleeping better, loving better, living better. This is the power of embodied awareness. It's not magic, it's practice. It's not perfection, it's presence. And the body, your body is not your enemy. It is the keeper of your truth, the home of your wisdom, the compass that never lies. So next time you feel that heat, that clench, that wave of intensity, don't run from it. Lean in, breathe deeper, get curious. Ask yourself, what does my body know right now that my mind hasn't caught up to yet? And then listen. That's the first step toward transforming anger into power. Not the kind that harms, but the kind that heals. In the next part, we'll explore what happens after you felt it, breathed with it, and named it. How do you move it? Express it. Use it. For action, for art, for justice, for joy? Because anger, when honored, becomes fuel. Not fire that burns everything down, but fire that lights the path forward. And that is where freedom lives. Anger with a face. True stories of transformation. Anger has a bad reputation. It's called toxic, destructive, sinful. We're told to suppress it, to stay quiet, to keep the peace. But let me tell you something that might shift your perspective. Anger, when held with mindfulness and compassion, can be the most honest, life-giving force you ever meet. Let me take you to a small community center just outside Oakland, California. A man sits in silence. He's not new to this practice. He's been coming every Thursday evening for months now. His name is Raphael, 48 years old, former gang member, a father of two, a man with a long scar running down his left cheek, not from a fight, but from his own hand. He once tried to carve the pain out of his body because no one ever taught him how to feel it. But tonight, he breathes. The group is reading Being Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh. The words settle in the room like warm rain. Peace is present right here and now, in ourselves and in everything we do and see. And then Raphael speaks. I used to think peace was soft, weak, a joke. But now I know, peace is the hardest thing I've ever tried to live. No one moves. You could hear the floor creak under someone's breath. He continues, I spent 20 years learning how to survive with fists, with rage, but all it did was cost me my freedom, my kids, my soul. It wasn't until I met a monk in prison. Yeah, a real monk, orange robe and everything, that I heard someone say, you're not broken. You're just carrying too much pain that no one helped you hold. That monk's name? Brother Phap Lu. A student of Thich Nhat Hanh, part of the Plum Village monastic community. He had been visiting the prison every month. No judgment, no preaching, just silence, just presence, just kindness. And that was enough to crack something open. Raphael now works as a youth counselor. He teaches young boys how to breathe, how to notice their hands balling up before they throw a punch, how to ask, what am I really feeling? How to speak before they scream. He always ends with the same line. You're allowed to be angry, but you gotta be present with it, or it'll eat you alive. Across the country, in New York City, a woman named Elise tells a different story, but the roots are the same. She's a trauma nurse. Sharp, fierce, brilliant, but behind her fire is a lifetime of pain. Growing up, she watched her mother endure emotional abuse, always quiet, always accommodating. Elise swore she'd never be like that, and she wasn't. She yelled, she fought, she never let anyone walk all over her. But deep down, she wasn't okay. She was scared, exhausted, lonely. Her anger had turned into armor, thick, heavy, suffocating. A friend invited her to a silent retreat upstate. She laughed in their face. You want me to sit still for 5 days with nothing but my thoughts? Are you out of your mind? But something in her broke, so she went. That's where she heard about Lama Rod Owens. He spoke openly about black rage, about queer rage, about spiritual bypassing, the way modern wellness culture can shame you for having strong emotions. And he said something that pierced right through her. You can't meditate your anger away. You've got to sit beside it, like it's your oldest, fiercest protector, and then slowly ask it what it wants. Elise cried for 3 days. She screamed into a pillow until her throat hurt. She wrote letters she never sent. She walked barefoot in the forest and sobbed without knowing why. And then she felt it. The space. Not emptiness, not numbness, freedom. Today, she still works in the ER, still fierce. But now when a patient lashes out, she pauses. She breathes, she listens for what's underneath. It's always fear, she says. Always some form of please see me. And I get that, because I've been there. These aren't stories to romanticize pain. They're stories to humanize anger, to remind you it's not something you have to be ashamed of. In fact, anger may be your first clue that something in your world is worth protecting. Your body knows, your spirit knows. But without mindfulness, it becomes a sword that turns on yourself. And this is where the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh become so precious. He taught that when we feel anger, we don't need to suppress it or express it violently. Instead, we care for it. Like a crying baby, like a wound that needs tending, not judgment. Imagine if every child learned that anger is not bad. It's a signal, a call for attention, for boundaries, for justice, for truth. Imagine if every adult knew how to pause before reacting, to breathe before blaming, to feel before fleeing. It starts with practice, with seeing anger not as the enemy, but as a doorway to your deepest values, to your unspoken hurts, to the part of you that still believes in fairness, in dignity, in being loved without having to be nice all the time. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." I believe anger is often that wound, and when we stop running from it, when we face it, feel it, breathe with it, we don't just find the fire, we find the light. Stay with me. In the final part, we'll gather everything we've explored and return home to something simple yet powerful. The truth that anger, like every emotion, is just asking to be seen, honored, and transformed. And from that place, you don't just heal, you shine. Coming home to yourself, a peace beyond anger. If you've come with me all this way, I want you to take a breath right now, a deep, conscious breath. Can you feel it? That quiet space inside you, beneath the stories, beyond the old wounds. It's always been there, waiting for you. That's what mindfulness gives us. Not a perfect life, not freedom from anger, but a path to walk with it, eyes open, heart soft, breath steady. It's strange how many of us live our entire lives trying to manage our emotions. We shove them down, we dress them up, we put on the smile, say we're fine. Until one day it all spills over into relationships, into our health, into decisions we can't take back. But mindfulness doesn't ask you to be better. It simply invites you to be here, as you are, anger and all. As Thich Nhat Hanh said so simply, to be beautiful means to be yourself. You don't need to be accepted by others. You need to accept yourself. That self, the one underneath the armor, underneath the rage, is still alive in you, still whole, still reachable. And what we've seen through every part of this journey, through Raphael, Elise, the teachings of Lama Rod Owens, the wisdom of ancient masters, is this: anger is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a deeper truth, because anger, when tended with care, becomes clarity. When we stop fighting it, it teaches us what we care about, what we need, where we hurt, where we must set boundaries, speak truth, or choose a new path. It's not always loud. Sometimes it looks like silence, stillness, a quiet refusal to carry pain that isn't yours anymore. One woman told me after practicing mindful breathing for months, "I used to explode at my daughter over the smallest things. Now I just pause, put my hand on my belly, and I can feel the heat rising. But it doesn't own me anymore. I can meet it and move with love instead." That's power, not control, not suppression, but choice. Mindfulness gives you choice. You can speak with fire and still have love in your voice. You can say no and still be full of compassion. You can be angry, deeply, righteously angry, and still move from peace. That is the revolution. And if you're thinking, "But I've tried, I can't sit still, I can't shut my mind off," good. That means you're alive. That means your practice is real. Because mindfulness isn't about silencing your mind. It's about becoming friends with it. Even the stormy parts. Especially the stormy parts. Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us, feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor. So if nothing else from this series stays with you, let this. Your breath is home, and you can always return to it. In the middle of a hard conversation, in the rush of traffic, in the sting of betrayal, in the tension before a scream. That breath, simple, ancient, sacred, is always there. And every time you come back to it, you step through that invisible door. From reaction to awareness, from anger to understanding, from pain to peace. Not overnight, not perfectly, but step by step, moment by moment, until one day you look back and realize you didn't get rid of your anger. You grew with it. You walked through it. And on the other side, you found not only freedom, but yourself. If this series has touched something in you, if a part of your soul stirred, softened, or saw itself reflected in these words, I want to invite you to stay connected. This is Mindfulness, a small corner of the internet where ancient wisdom meets everyday life. We don't offer perfection here, only presence, practice, and gentle reminders that you're not alone in your journey. So take what resonates. Revisit the parts that speak to you. Share with someone who might need it. And remember, you don't need to change to be worthy of peace. You just need to come home, to your breath, to your truth, to this moment. And we'll be right here, walking beside you. With love, the Mindfulness team.